So I don't even know how we met. I feel like we just kind of were like DMing and you were cool and I knew you were a sales dude, but you weren't trying to sell me on shit. And like, long story short, I found out very quickly that you knew a thing or 25 about sales. And I just thought it was time to like bring you on. And so I know you now own your own business. And so I want you to kind of share a little bit about your background and your expertise, and don't be humble, and just kind of like what you do now, because I think you have a really cool story. And I want people to know that like you are, they should listen to every word you say is what I'm trying to tell you.
Well, I appreciate that. And it goes to the power of podcasts. I heard you on a podcast. I was absolutely blown away by you and how to reach out and acknowledge you for all the things that you're doing in the nutrition space and helping coaches. Like the 30,000-foot view in the sky of my story. 8 years ago, in March of 2016, I was diagnosed with cancer, had no idea what a nutrition coach was, never walked into a gym, and I just wanted to get healthy post cancer, post chemo. So I just reached out to the fittest person that I knew in Nashville, and I was like, what should I do? And they're like, you should hire a nutrition coach. And I had no idea what that was. I couldn't read a food label. I couldn't tell you what a macronutrient was. But 7 years later, since that day, there's never been a day in my life where I haven't had a nutrition coach or worked with a nutrition coach. And I probably will to the day I die. I say that because I've been in sales for 20 years now, but the majority of that was in the music industry, why I lived in Nashville. And because a nutrition coach saved my life, changed my identity, I wanted to be able to give back and serve the people that had helped me through really traumatic times of my life and literally help me transform my body, my spirit, my emotions, my finances, my relationships. That's why I love this industry. So fast forward, I worked really hard to get out of the music industry post COVID. Met my former boss in the former company that I worked with, and was the sales director, sales coach, center manager, sales director, you name it, and did that for 3 years in the online nutrition coaching space, certification space, business coaching space. And recently, 11 months ago, I left to start my own sales consulting business, closed
11
one
weeks
academy.
ago, weeks ago.
Weeks ago, 11 weeks ago, to start my own business at the age of 40, finally believing in myself, finally taking action with my own visions and dreams, and started my own sales consulting business for online nutrition coaches, fit pros. Also, do some venture out into other businesses where I go in, do sales audits for their acquisition department. So that's sales, setting, marketing, and then give them a 90-day plan to generate more impact and more income. So that is the quick drive-by version of who Nick Ross is. I also chasing a pro card in bodybuilding. I love to do motivational speaking, and also a podcaster. So that's me.
Casual. And also casual, right? Like you've been part of some really crazy big teams and wins, right? Like, I mean, companies that are making like how much per month? Like, I know that's really cool to hear, just to kind of show like your skill set and dynamic.
Yeah, over the 20 years in the industry of sales, literally since the day I graduated college, moved to Hollywood, my first job was a sales job. That's all I've ever known. I've only ever known being paid commission. So 3 different industries have helped generate $1 million plus companies. The last company that I was in helped take them from a $250,000 a month business to a $1 million a month business doing well over 8 figures a year. And it was a lot of fun. Honestly, I learned incredible amounts. Was a learning experience really in what we all, we're not really like, we are nutrition coaches and fit pros and high ticket offer coaches, but what we really are, if you scale all the way back, we're online marketers. Like that's the industry that we're really working and learning how to operate in. And so I just like have had like a masterclass the last 3.5 years in quote unquote online marketing, online sales, online setting. And yeah, just paying it forward and teaching people the lessons I learned.
Oh yeah, awesome. So I want to dive in to just the basics, and that is the friction and resistance that exists around the DM process, right? Because in this podcast, we're going to dive into DMs, we're going to dive into sales calls, objection handling, team building, all of the things. So whatever you're struggling with as you're listening to this, just know we are probably going to cover it. But so many people have this like failure to launch kind of situation, whether it be a coach who scaled quickly, but they never developed that foundation, whether it's a brand new coach trying to get their first 5 clients. Like I just see so much resistance to really DMing, right? So I'd love to know more about kind of how you overcome that I feel salesy kind of mentality.
Yeah, I believe all of that comes from the fear of rejection. Really, when you boil it all down, feeling salesy or sleazy or scammy or whatever term that you really want to use. And what I find is with coaching people or helping businesses, especially on the online space, is that people tie their confidence into their ability. And that is the mistake. If you, as a coach, tie your nutrition coaching or your Fit Pro confidence into your ability, you're probably not going to move forward. A lot of people tie their business confidence into their sales and setting ability, and that is a massive mistake. Where you have to tie your confidence into is your intention. That is what is important. And this is the first thing that I help all of my clients with is like, why did you get into this? Why do you want to help people? Why do you want to serve people? Are you aligned in your thoughts, your words, your actions, and most importantly, your heart? Because we've all said, done, and thought nice things, but like helped other people begrudgingly. Like we really didn't want to help them. So we weren't aligned in our heart. If you are fully and truly aligned, thoughts, words, actions, and your heart, then your intention is pure. And if your intention is pure to impact a life, which I believe outside our military, our first responders, pediatric oncologists, like nutrition coaches are doing some of the most beautiful work in the world. Like I believe that they truly help solve some of all of people's problems because I am the testimony to that. So if your intentions are pure, then the consequences don't matter. How someone might react, how they might object, if they ghost you, if they say no, that does not matter because I'm here to actually impact an actual life, not try to collect income. And if your intention is just to collect income, or this person made 25K this month, I'm trying to make 30K and you're comparing, or you're trying to pay a bill, or you're desperate, that's called commission breath. And people are going to smell that a million miles away. So, like, go back to your intention. We all suffer from the plight of the broken. We all want to fix in others, which was once broken in us. That's what I focus on. Like, hey, man, I don't want you to go through what I went through. Let me show you a better way because I mean, that's what ultimately not knowing what the hell to do and living a really unhealthy lifestyle led me to having cancer at the age of 32.
Absolutely. And I think that some of the coaches that really struggle, I mean, it's confidence, number one, it's lack of knowledge. And I find that they've also either just been sold to in a way that felt gross. Like maybe they've been bombarded with business coaches and they're just kind of turned off by the process. But I think it's a lot of preconceived notions. So I'm with you. And I say the same thing that you do about like coming back to your intention because like we are just here to help somebody, right? Like your first DM should not be intent to sell. So whenever you're looking at, let's talk about coaches that are, you know, around that 6-figure mark, let's say 250,000 even, right? If we're auditing their organic sales process and their sales funnel, right? Looking at like their lead magnets and things like that, how do you judge unless they say, hi, here are my numbers, it's converting? Like, how would you give them feedback on if a lead magnet is converting? Because this is another sticky topic, right? Is like, are my lead magnets working? Are they good? So I'd love to know your feedback there.
Yeah. I mean, there's certain statistics that I know just across the online marketing industry. I've been blessed to be mentored by some of the best people in the space. Eli Wild, the Hermosis, uh, Matt Ryder from Seventh Level, which is the third largest coaching company for sales internationally in the world. And so just like knowing some stats, like if we're going to talk about stats, then 25%, 25 to 30% of the people that raise their hand that say, I want your free thing, you should be engaging in a conversation with. Out of that 25 to 30%, you should be booking about 20 to 25% of those conversations, right? A great show rate is going to be about 75%, and a good close percentage should be about 50%. The problem is that so many people want the glamour stats and the glamour KPIs of I had 100 comments and all of these people liked this post or this hand raise thing that I did. And I've been teaching this. I had like 7 coaching calls today. At 6 of them, I had the same exact conversation. On Friday, I made a post for a free thing. That free thing was the story booking method, how to book calls using your stories, polls, and tap features. Okay. I posted one piece of content that took me 5 minutes to make in Canva, sharing my clients' wins using that freebie opt in. Right now, over Facebook group, my Facebook page, my Instagram stories, and my Instagram page. So 4 different spots, it collectively got 20 hand raises. But if we run those metrics and we run those stats, I was able to book 3 calls in one day on a few hours of work from one post, right? So I'm always going to go and use numbers to make non-emotional and non-opinionated decisions in my business. Like simply look at the stats. You didn't have to get 100 comments. If you do that, something like that every single day or 4 or 3 days a week, we're talking about maybe 10 calls. We're talking about maybe 2 or 3 new clients. And over a course of a quarter, that adds up really quickly. So like, look at the data, look at the KPIs. We're not trying to like set land speed records here either. Like
I think people
the biggest,
expect too, like when they put something out, you know, and not everybody buys it, like, or not buys it, but opts in, they get their feelings hurt, right? Because they spent so much time making this beautiful thing and whatever else, right? But not that this is a marketing, you know, podcast episode, but I think that really dialing in sales, I mean, it just takes time, right? Like it takes time and repetition. I think so many people put one thing out there one time, send 10 messages one time, and
absolutely. Yeah. It's also the quality of your conversation. I think one of the things that happens in the setting process is that people go way too long. They're having way too long of a conversation, meaning not like how many questions and answers are being had, but you have to capitalize on speed. Like literally, I will give you the hack to booking more calls immediately. Speed to lead and speed to response. You have to understand that when they raise their hand for your free thing, there's an emotion happening there. They are subconsciously admitting, I have a problem with the thing that I just raised my hand about. So if it's, how to get shredded by summer and carve your core, and a bunch of dudes raise their hand for your free, I call it value exchange content, VEC, then they are admitting that there is a problem with that in their life. And I literally on Saturday sent a screenshot to a former client because I am in her Facebook group, and there was 15 hand raises in her group for her free VEC, and all of them said 6 to 7 hours ago. And I'm like, I sent it to her. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Now I don't even coach her anymore, but like, I'm like, you got to be kidding me, because it's speed wins. If you have a VEC, you don't sit there and post it while you don't have time to nurture those conversations. Like people think that I use ManyChat, and I don't use ManyChat because I'm able to respond so quickly because I have organization of my scripts, my iNotes, my copy and paste. I'm working on my computer. I work with a lot of clients that don't even have Facebook Messenger app installed on their computer. They're
okay,
doing
that's a
everything
whole
on
other
their phone.
problem. That's a whole other
What's
problem.
that?
That's a whole issue. What I mean, I work with clients that are so confused on what like KPIs are, right? And I'm not talking about you're starting out, you're brand new in business. I mean, like I've worked with coaches that are making 500,000 and like can't even give me a P&L. You know what I mean? Like I think too, and we're talking about tracking data, you mentioned taking the emotion out of it, and we take sales so personal. And what happens when you have more volume? You hear no more. What happens when you send more messages? You get more people ghosting you, right? Now, obviously, you can dial those things in, but I want to ask you about scripting, right? Because I think that we probably have like different thoughts on this. Again, I don't have like formal sales background training, right? And I think that you have obviously a ton of sales training. And so for me, when I was DMing in the beginning, I didn't know that it was DMing. I was just talking to people on the internet. There wasn't a script, but I kind of figured out what worked and what didn't because I've always just been a human and that seems to work. But I would love to know how you go about helping coaches kind of design their scripts. And let's first say to the coach who might be looking to get their first hire and they're prepping for a setter, like how are you helping them kind of design that?
Yeah, I always use this analogy first. There's 3 types of work. There's guesswork, there's hard work, and there's a framework. Now, if you want to guess in your business, good luck. Like, I literally wish you best of luck. You'll probably get there 5, 10 years. Maybe you'll quit, but you can't guess in your business. There's hard work. My grandmother and my grandfather worked really, really hard. They don't have much to show for it. Hard work's important, but it's not the end all be all. Lastly, there's a framework, a systemized process that gets you a consistent result. So when I'm training setters or I'm training solopreneurs how to set, I teach them two frameworks. The first one's ACA, acknowledge, compliment, and ask. That is how you should be responding to every single question that you ask. The next framework is POP, P-O-P, pain, obstacles, and possibility. When we clear pain, we have to clear 4 parts of pain. What is the actual problem that you're suffering from? How long or the duration of that problem? Oh, hey,
I love the balloons on Zoom.
the duration of the problem. What is the impact? How is this showing up in your life day to day? How is it impacting other people in your life? And then not so much in a DM, more on a sales call, like have them tell you the time they first started noticing that problem. Like, tell me about the day you looked in the mirror, you looked down at the scale and you noticed that this was a really big problem. I don't necessarily go over that so much in a DM. That's more in a sales conversation. And then you have to get obstacles. What's currently preventing you from accomplishing this on your own? Then you have to clear possibility. In the next 3 to 6 months, what are the results that you would like to achieve? And so once I clear that, and that has to happen quickly. This is back to speed. You can increase your top line revenue by 30% by engaging with people in the first 4 to 5 minutes of them opting in or raising their hand. But also, you have to understand you're an asynchronous communication channel. Okay. What you and I are doing right now is called synchronous communication. If you ask me a question and I sit there and I look at you for 10 minutes, it's going to get super awkward. But in a DM, text, or email, that is called asynchronous communication. The other person has a decision on when to respond to you. And so if you ask a question and you walk away from the conversation and you come back 3 hours later, then that person responds 3 hours later. Then you go to bed and then you wake up the next day. Like, that's destroying your setting. Like, you have to go back and forth, back and forth. So acknowledge, compliment, and ask. So, if I ask someone, how long has this been a problem for? How long have you been experiencing this? And they say 5 years. I would acknowledge, wow, it sounds like this has been super frustrating for you, but I want to acknowledge you. I want to, and then compliment. I want to acknowledge you for not giving up. Tell me, how has this problem been showing up in your life day to day? And we ask another question. So those are the two frameworks that I teach, but also wrapping all of that around speed to lead and speed to response.
Let's talk about response speed. Okay. So obviously having a setter would make that significantly faster, but if somebody is not able to respond within minutes, right? Like let's say it's a check-in day. Let's say a coach has calls, like how many touch points per day? How often should you be checking the DMs? Like, in your opinion, like what does that look like?
I can't speak to everyone, but everyone has their own work-life balances and their own boundaries, but I'm a hyper competitive driven person. I'm in the middle of prep, and I can tell you when I was in the gym on Friday, I set a call in between my sets. Like, that's what it means to me. So, like, of course, I do have back-to-back calls on many days of the week, but I'm not making a hand raise post on a day that I know I'm on calls for 5 or 6 hours straight. I'll make that hand raise post when I'm done working for the day. I can sit down at my computer, or I like to go out on my deck and go sit out by the fire. And from like 6 to 8 o'clock at night, people are on their phones, and you could set a lot of calls at that time. And if I'm not doing any coaching calls at that point in time anyway. So, again, everyone has different boundaries of when they do or do not want to work, but if you want to reach your
But see,
goals and you
that's
want to
like a
get there.
whole other conversation, because I think that work-life balance was created by people that work 9 to 5s that hate them, right? And I think that when we're talking about balance, like that's something that's earned, right? Like, and in my opinion, if you love what you do, your balance is going to look different. Like I could work granted, yes, I take recovery and rest days, but I don't take any days off of the DMs unless I am truly taking a vacation, like a true vacation, and I'm relaxing. But Saturday morning, first thing in the morning, still doing it. Sunday, first thing in the morning, still doing it, right? And I would say, like, if you're a coach that's kind of, yeah, even if you have a setter, I recommend that you book in your setter so that you're constantly sending voice memos back and forth, like when they're off, so that people are like, oh, it's Taeler talking to me. Like they
Mhm.
feel more connected. And that's only going to help you train your setter further. But I was just curious what your thoughts are and what you would tell a coach, because if somebody's working a 9 to 5 job, I remember when I had it, well, TV was pretty brutal, but I feel like a lot of people in 9 to 5s are like not doing shit. They're like sitting at their desk, shopping online. Like, why can't you get in the DMs? Again, I know that's not everybody, but some people have really chill 9 to 5s. And
Mhm.
so I don't know. I just feel like lunch break, I was booking calls when I was at my job. Like I was just doing anything and everything because there was nothing more important to me than getting out of that toxic environment, matching my salary. Because I think in the beginning, you are driven by money and then it changes and morphs as you kind of build stability. But this whole idea of like, I'm going to take a social media detox for the weekend, like, how are you helping coaches prevent burnout that maybe aren't at your level?
I don't really believe in the concept of burnout. I mean, you're talking to someone that nearly lost their life at the age of 32. And so, like, I'm trying to make up for an incredible amount of lost time in my life of not reaching my highest potential. I also feel that I'm constantly racing time and trying to get to my goals before my grandmother passes away, before my mom passes away, before I lose more people. The older you get, man, I think the more driven I become. I don't, you talked about a vacation. I've gone on one actual vacation in 3.5 years.
Oh, my
And that
vacation was the joke. I
that's
tried taking
that's
one.
not it, right. It's not, and that's I'm not bragging, but I love what I do so much that being in a DM or being on a sales call or helping someone solve a painful problem, that's me keeping a promise that I made to God for a second chance at life. Like these are the things that I love to do. And I know I worked for one company for 15 years and spent the last 5 years trying to get out of it. And no matter what I have to do in the DM or wake up early or do things late at night, it is not worse than having to drive into a brick and mortar, fight the traffic there, fight the traffic back, be told what to do, have to ask for vacation time, and deal with all the other crap you have to deal with when you have to help someone else's dream come to life. So, honestly, I don't even talk to my clients about burnout. I don't even think that they would want to ask me about it because I'm not going to have a very nice answer. Get the work done, impact the life, like, and keep moving forward.
I agree. I mean, I think that coaches that are experiencing burnout, like they're either going about it in a different way. And I think it's really important to say this too. Like, I know this is harsh, but not everyone is meant to be a business owner. Like, not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur. Like, we do need employees. We do need people that just get a paycheck, right? Like, I think it's also being very open and honest, because I talk to a lot of coaches that they're finally getting some strides. They're making multi six figures. They want to make seven figures, and they're just like, God, like I just want to be out of the DMs. And I'm like, it's not going to be now. Like
Mhm.
it's not going to be now. And you getting a setter, you're still going to be in there more because you're going to be auditing. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like at least until
Yep.
you're not, right? But like
Right.
it's I just think it's interesting that the goal is always like more like or less work rather. And to some extent, I get that, right? Like there should be things you're doing today that in years from now, maybe you're doing them differently or you've outsourced or whatever. But in my opinion, when you're being lazy about the only way that makes you money, landing sales, like I don't know what to tell you, you know?
I'll, I'll also state like technology acumen, TQ, which most people don't ever think about. Like you have to get better with technology and get faster utilizing technology to gain back human experience and time with other human beings. Like if you were a setter that came and worked on my set team, one of the first things that you did when you got your first commission check, I'm like, yo, you need to go buy a bigger monitor because you literally need to look at more things. Like you can't be on a 13-inch little laptop screen trying to run your business when you can only see so much real estate. You can't multitask properly. You don't know keyboard shortcuts to properly copy and paste and alt tab and get to this window. Like if you can learn, like go on YouTube and learn some keyboard shortcuts and organize your Google Drives and your iNotes. You know what I mean? Like also the other thing is like it used to be a running joke. Like if you didn't have an iPhone and a Mac, you weren't going to work with us because like you can communicate so quickly with iMessage on your, and like everyone's got a Mac basically nowadays, but like utilizing technology, think about the term. You're an online coach. Like learn the online technology, the social media, like saved replies. Oh my goodness, on Instagram, they will get so much time back. So, you know, everyone focuses on AQ, acquiring knowledge, but in EQ, emotional intelligence, but also there's TQ, technology acumen.
I agree 100%. I interviewed a setter that I remember we actually hired this setter, and it was like I was showing her something and she didn't have a laptop. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't know that. I mean, she got one, right? But I had never interviewed somebody for a position like this that didn't have a laptop. And so, I mean, I think it's important to really make sure that like you've got your systems dialed in and that you know how to kind of like teach somebody else how to do it. And I do want to segue into team building, right? Because that is the shiny thing. Everyone wants a setter, everybody wants a salesperson, this and that. And so when we're looking at hiring a setter, right? And I know that you mentioned, you know, making between 30 to 50K a month before you bring them in. I typically look at lead quality and like just volume so that they have something to do. But I've got people hiring setters part-time as well, not just full-time. But I would love to know like how you not vet them, but just how do you run your sales huddles? Like, how do you keep them motivated? Because so many coaches, and I'll admit this, like I was not doing daily sales huddles until recently. I was doing like a weekly sales call. And it's like so much better having a daily meeting. And I think that even if it's just a coach and one setter, I would argue that meeting with them every damn day is probably something that I wish I would have done earlier.
Yeah, with setters in particular, you have to meet with them every single day. The key term here is to inspect what you expect. Because at the end of the day, if this person, this setter, does not have a plan throughout the day on in the morning, because like there's best times to communicate on certain platforms. And if like I've known setters that they're like, oh yeah, I already reached out to everyone, but they did it at like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. But like the response rates are going to be terrible, right? And so like you have to be able, especially if you have a CRM or you have inbound coming in and then you have outbound and then you're doing a hand raise post and then there's a welcome post in your group and then they have to go back and nurture conversations 14. I'm getting up in the morning. The setters are the first people that I meet with Monday through Friday. And then I'm setting the expectations of what needs to get done that day. And then I'm also, if time allows, I'm inspecting their conversations and we're talking through some of the conversations from the previous day. And so if you're doing a lot of outbound, you have to understand the fortune is in the follow-ups, especially when it comes to having a setter. I think it's like 60 to 70% of calls that are booked are from the fourth to seventh contact. And I know you're like, oh my God, that sounds ridiculous. Well, guess what? I got to call my mom 4 or 5 times in one day sometimes for my mom to pick up. And that's my mom. No one loves me more. Why do I have to contact my mom 3 or 4 times in a day for her to pick up? Because my mom's busy. And so this other person that doesn't even know you on social media, they're super busy too. So one of the things that I have them do is I will have them every single day. They have to go back 14 days, calendar days, and reignite or rekindle, I think, as you say, all of those conversations going up. Once you do that, then you go back 30 days and you do that every single day and work your way back up the list to get people to re-engage. And obviously you have to have the proper scripts and know what to say, not, you know, have what I call commission breath where you seem incredibly desperate, but you also have to know how to humanize those conversations. Sometimes we become too reliant on just copy and pasting the same thing 20 times in a row, and we end up sounding like a bot, and then no one's going to respond. But the majority of it comes down to having KPIs, making sure those KPIs are updated, which generally is how many conversations did you have on each platform? So Facebook group, CRM, Instagram, if you're on TikTok, or email. How many conversations do you have on all those platforms? How many people responded and how many did you book? Looking at that, then also looking at their conversations and then setting their day, like step 1, step 2, step 3, and doing that Monday through Friday, at least 30 minutes a day.
When you say conversations, like you're saying conversations like that are ongoing, conversations started as in how many people we reached out to or how many people like are actively talking to us. Can you clarify that one?
Yeah. So the one problem with social media is there's nothing that's going to integrate with Meta for us to pull data out and track KPIs. Meta will never allow us to do that. They're never going to open up the back end of their API and integrate it to something that's going to track that. And so there's also a diminishing return. So like I don't want the setter to literally be tally marking every single conversation because that's just silly. Like there's not enough time in a day. So what I've always told them is to just take an estimate of any conversation that you had that day. So that could have been a respark, a rekindle. It could have been a first contact. It could have been second contact. I just want to know how many people did they touch that day in that specific platform.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And that's what I was asking because some of these metrics become really tedious and not in a way where I'm like, that's lazy, but it's like some of that is not going to be beneficial long term. So I was curious how you kind of I guess, differentiated that. So
When you get to a super high level and you're like in a HubSpot or a Go High level and you're like getting these more sophisticated platforms and you're doing a lot of inbound, then that becomes super easy to quantify through the CRM. But on social media, again,
correct.
it's like there's diminishing returns. I just want to know how many conversations that you had, how many of those people actually you had a conversation, like responded back and forth, and then how many did we book out of that?
So in the first, like, let's say the setter, the new setter, and let's say for the sake of this, they are more outbound. Okay, the company's not running ads just yet. They're not in like a go high level, but in my opinion, the first, 14 days, really 30 are so freaking critical and important to like set the stage and really dial that in. How do you work with coaches and business owners to train their setters effectively to make sure that they sound like them, they have a nice workflow? Like, how are you kind of working with them on that?
I, in particular, like at least 2 weeks of training before they start actually
Always.
going on commission. The majority of it is going to be one, they have to learn the product. So they need to understand the product inside and out. If you have a team, introducing them to the team, having them have some meetings with the other coaches, with the salesperson. They need to review your sales calls. They need to look at your terminology. They need to look, if you have a podcast, listen to the podcast, watching your content. And then they should be taking notes of any of the vocabulary, the words that you use quite often, because we all have kind of those filler words and buzz terms that we all use. But first and foremost, integrating them into the culture and into the product and services so they understand how to actually facilitate a conversation, right? They also need to understand the steps and processes of your offer. And a lot of coaches don't actually know the wins and the outcomes of their offer, right? They just like, I'm a nutrition coach, I'm a fitness coach. Like, no, we should have a really rock solid offer with step 1, step 2, and step 3. A very broad framework that a lot of people use is step 1, metabolic restoration, step 2, fat loss acceleration, step 3, lifestyle integration. You remarket those terms so they're appealing to your ICA, but they need to understand the product, because a lot of what I see for the problem with setters is they don't understand exactly what the company's trying to accomplish or the ideal client that they're trying to serve. So like the conversation's super general. And if you're, hiring with people whose primary language or their first language isn't English, then that can really communicate and do massive damage to your business if like they're representing you and those conversations make no sense. So I always love, when available, it's not always, but at least 2 weeks of training And then immediately, but you're meeting with them every single day. And then immediately after that, meeting with them every morning. And the setters are the first people that I always meet with every morning. And then
Oh
immediately
yeah,
after that, the sales team.
absolutely. Cool. So whenever you see, because obviously setting is so it's gruesome, right? Like it's usually not a destination. People typically want to become closers or whatever. I think it's really rare that you find a setter that sticks around for, a year even. So whenever you see, because again, we're all humans here, we're not robots. So when you start to see not, maybe performance is dipping a little bit, instead of an A to B average, they're swinging from an A to an F, or whatever, having just some bad days. How do you incentivize setters so that they are not constantly feeling fatigued and they're motivated? Like, how are you motivating these people to keep going?
Yeah, the same way that I do it for every single person that I'm going to be a leader of. And that's through, it's a framework I learned through Tony Robbins. It's called RPM, Result, Purpose, Massive Action Plan. So one of the very first things that I do when I bring someone onto a team is I figure out what is the result that you want. And usually this is a monetary result, the money that they want to make. How much money do you want to make a month doing this job, right? Then when they're like, I want to make 2K, 3K, 4K, 5K, however much that is a month, then I want to know why. If I'm able to help you make that amount of money, who is that going to impact in your life? Right? And some of the setters that we hire internationally, making $3,000-4,000 USD is life changing. So like I'm going to learn that she's going to be able to get her dad a new house. She's going to be able to buy a new car. She's going to be able to get a new washer and dryer. She hasn't been to the beach on a vacation in 5 years. And so it's never, hey, the company's down this week, this month, this quarter. We need to drive, drive, drive. It's, hey, how can we get better and improve so we can get you on that vacation and get you to the beach? And I'm always going back to their own emotional drivers and the purpose, but the money can't be about how it's going to impact their life. It's got to be about how the money is going to impact the ones that they love. And people are more willing to go the extra mile when they know you're on their side to help the people they love, which is generally their kids, their significant other, or their direct family members.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I love that. I just, sometimes like spot check if somebody's like energy is down or whatever. Like, let's say your setter hasn't taken a day off in I don't know, a long time. Like, do you ever give them a day off? Like, how do you kind of manage that?
In my previous career, we were probably really bad at that. I never had a setter ever last less than a year to 18 months. But that was just simply because we had so much inbound. There was always something to be done. Um, I'm probably not the best person to ask that question just because um, we were so driven to as a team and as a company to hit our mission and to hit our goals to drive forward. Now, I don't believe that anyone should be working 7 days a week. I don't believe setters should be working 6 days a week. I think a Monday through Friday schedule with typically breaks in the afternoon, depending on the time zone that they live in. Everyone's a different time zone. But generally, what I find is the best times to have conversations, I'm sure as you as well, are usually earlier in the morning and later at night. And giving them a break in between those two, we'll call them conversation times to just like rest, recover, do their personal stuff, and continue to go forward.
Yeah. When do you think somebody's ready to hire a closer?
It, I guess you really the entrepreneur, the solopreneur really has to ask themselves what's enough, because if you get a closer, it's a lot of work to train them. Second of all, really good closers already have a job and they're already getting paid a lot of money. So it's not like there's this endless supply of, the general close percentage in America is 20 to 30%. Right. So if you hire someone, you have to expect if you are closing 50, 60, 70% because you are the face of the company, the product like the back of your hand, and you were closing really well. And now you just want to bring in this closer. Like you have to be okay to admit your business is going to take a hit for possibly months. So are you willing to give that up? Are you willing to put in all the extra time to do it? If they do get good in 60 to 90 days, are you willing to give them 10% commission? And did hiring that salesperson double your revenue, or did you only make 15% more, but you lost 10 to pay them the commission and you only made 5% more, but it wasn't worth the time and effort and sacrifice to hire and to train them? Like, you have to take all of those things into consideration, because people love to say, I hate sales. I hate selling. Hmm, that's fascinating. How much do you actually know about influence, persuasion, and communication? Because what I know about it is it affects every single relationship in my life. And the quality of my life is dependent on the quality of my relationships, and the quality of my relationships is dependent on the quality of my communication skills. So why wouldn't you want to invest in influence, persuasion, and communication and get better at that? Oh, by the way, it's going to make you a better coach. Oh, by the way, it's going to make you a better parent. Oh, by the way, it's going to make you better, dealing with arguments with your significant other, if you actually knew how to properly negotiate with someone. So, like, you really have to take a lot into consideration. I can tell you, in my former life and career, really, we did not want people taking on a closer until about $40,000 to $50,000 a month. Yeah, and you have to make a serious consideration. And usually at that point, you have assistant coaches. So if you're making that decision, you're also going to be affecting your assistant coaches.
I'm with you 100%. I think that people outsource sales so fast. I can't tell you how many coaches I've worked with making, just scraping the surface of six figures, having a setter, and the setter isn't performing. They're wondering why, right? And I think you definitely brought up a great point, because no one is going to sell better than you, at least not in the beginning, right? Like, you know that product, you have the framework, and not to mention, like, you're going to be your business's biggest advocate. Like, no one's going to be more bought into the vision than you. So when you outsource that so soon, it really puts a damper on kind of your business scale. Absolutely. So I want to dive into objection handling, because that's always a fun topic, right? And I know that, there's a million we can go over, but essentially diving into just how you navigate these before the call, on the call, after the call, et cetera. Because I know you've got tons on this and your thoughts.
Yeah. The first thing that I do with all of my clients is we work on the vocabulary of that question. The number one question I'm asked as a sales coach is, Nick, how do I overcome objections? That that sentence creates the problem in itself. It is adversarial by nature. Why do I want to overcome an objection? Wouldn't I rather prevent an objection from happening? Wouldn't that be simpler? You can reach out to me. I'll give you a 25-page objection handling script with all the reframes and everything that you need, all the anecdotal stories, the epiphany bridge stories you need. Are you truly interested in memorizing a 25-page objection disarming and handling script? I don't think any nutrition coach I have ever met is. Now, I am, because I love sales, influence, persuasion, and communication. So I'll answer your question, but I need people to understand what's more important is learning how to prevent objections and disarming and diffusing objections. There's this really old, dusty, dried up acronym in sales called ABC, always be closing. You cannot have that mindset in 2024. It's ABD, always be diffusing. So the first thing that I teach my clients is how to legitimize their business in the eyes of their leads and their prospects. It's 2024. The online coaching space has blown up in the last 4 years. There's more noise, there's more burnt buyers. All the marketing gimmicks have been done. Everyone's running the same frameworks and the same launch promotions. The audience and the prospects are hyper aware. So if you look like every other TikTok and Instagram coach, you have not differentiated yourself. And this is part of the reason why you're getting objections for your high ticket offer, right? So, how do we build know, like, and trust? How do we build social proof? How do we build social trust? How do we get people to know us like us and know that we get results before they ever get on the phone. That's what I spend the majority of my time with my clients on. That's going to be done through making offer slides, breakdown of your offer, a pre-call guide, videos that go out, text automations, email automations from your Calendly with this beautiful pre-call guide that has testimonials, video testimonials, your story, your Epiphany Bridge story, your core tenets, your mission statement, why you started this business. And all of that is the difference between going on a blind date with someone and what's going to, like, one, you have a decision not to show up on that blind date, or they're going to not show up on the call. But also, if you went on that blind date, aren't you, don't you have more anticipation, more anxiety? Aren't you going to probably not be as vulnerable with that person and open up to them with about your painful problems, rather than if your girlfriend set you up with this wildly successful guy that you know what he looks like, you're probably more willing to show up to the date, and you're probably going to open up and answer more uh, authentically and with genuine answers, right? So I know that was very long-winded, but I spend so much time on helping people understand there's all this stuff you can do before the call that prevents objections. Okay. Now, let me answer your question specifically. For any objection that you get, because yes, they do exist, there's a 3-step framework that you follow every single time. One is you summarize what you heard. This gets you on the same side of the negotiation table. And anytime you summarize or label what you heard, you become a likable listener. People automatically like you. 2, we're going to validate their fear. Whatever they said is their objection, we're going to validate it. And lastly, the most important step is that you have to establish the need for the program. Before you try to disarm or diffuse the objection, you have to get them to agree that if we solve this problem together, is this even the right program for you? Next is that everything that you say has to hit an emotional target. So you could say the right thing, but say it in the wrong tonality, and it's not going to hit the emotional target and move the lead prospect forward. So when you're doing objection handling, you have to be a little concerned. So what I'm hearing here, Taylor, is that you want to speak to your husband, Jim, so he feels a part of the decision-making process. And by the way, I think that's a wonderful idea. And I know this is a silly hypothetical question, but bear with me for a second. If Jim was here right now and he's like, honey, yeah, get signed up. Let's do this. Would this even be the right program for you? Do you mind telling me why a little bit though? What do you think you and Jim collectively would think is the best part of this program? Now, I can keep going on and on and on, but you have to, again, summarize what you heard, validate the fear, and establish the need for the program. Now, I want to talk about the spouse objection real quick. People come to me, my clients come to me, or people will reach out to me and say, Nick, how do I overcome spousal objections? I just got one. And I go, what was the husband's name? And they go, I don't know. I'm like, wow, wild. You didn't even ask about the significant other. You didn't even get clarity of the support system. And so one thing that's really important to know, guys, is that what most coaches do for the partner objection, or and by the way, the spousal objection is really just a third party appeal. It's really a finance objection anyways. There's a difference between support and belief. And so early on the call, again, we want to prevent the objection from happening. Ms. Jones, who's supporting you on this journey to lose the 30 to 40 pounds that you said you've been struggling to lose for the last half decade? Who's supporting you on that journey? Don't just assume it's the husband. Don't just assume it's whatever. Let them tell you. By the way, if they say no one's supporting them, then you say, I'm going to support you. I'm going to be your support system. Because people will say that. They'll start crying. When they say my husband's supporting me, you're going to say, oh, and what's your husband's name? Jim. How does Jim feel about you being in the best health and shape of your life? Like, how does Jim really feel about that? That is a completely different question than the question that everyone asks, which is, does your husband support you? Like, if your husband doesn't support you, you don't need a nutrition coach. You need a relationship coach. You're not the one for me. right? But then from there, they're like, how does Jim feel about you being in the best health and shape of your life? She's going to explain and then say, I understand Jim supports you, but does he believe that you can actually accomplish this? Because there's a difference between those two. So we can't run through them all, but that's one example of how to prevent objections from happening in the qualification phase. Again, if you get it, summarize what you heard, validate the fear, establish the need for the program.
I mean, I think that's beautiful, right? And I agree. I think that like so many people hear an objection and clam up. And in my opinion, they're all similar in different ways, right? Like they're not all identical, but they're not all completely different. You know, that's the one that I think people are so uncomfy about because they just truly don't know how to combat that. They don't know how to follow up after, right? You know, the other question I get pretty frequently is, do I get the card on the call? Do I not? Am I messing up if I don't get the card on the call, right? So, you know, let's say somebody is in and they don't want to think about it. They're like, yeah, send me all the stuff. And then they get off the call. And then what happens? They don't actually purchase. Sometimes they do, but I'm just curious, how do you coach people through that? Because I think some people are nervous to ask them to pull out their card.
Yeah, well, one, you need to be prepared. So back to technology acumen. If you're doing a Zoom call, or even if you're doing a phone call, your Stripe, your links, your products, everything should be up on your computer. And you need to assume that I am closing this person. Part of the reason why people don't want to collect on the phone is they're like, oh my God, I got to go in Stripe. I got to go in my invoice. I got to make an in-house financing thing. I got to add the contract. I got to, and like they're afraid of doing all of those things. Like have all those things ready to go, right? You can make prepaid options in Stripe, like links, and use them repeatedly. So like you should have all that built out. All those links should be in a Google document. My 6-month 2K, my 6-month $1,000 enrollment into 250 a month. Like all of those things should be built out, ready to go. The next thing is once a lead and prospect tells you that they're going to pay and then they don't pay, it's a tough one. Like it will really rip through your hierarchy of values and beliefs and confidence. So I teach, if a person has agreed to pay, then great. Then just assume the next steps. Next steps from here, Miss Jones, is I'm going to send you a payment link. I'm going to text that to you right now. It takes 5 minutes to fill out if you want to go grab your card in the meantime. As soon as you make a payment, you're going to get an email confirmation for payment and receipt. And immediately after that, I'm going to send you your onboarding link and we're going to get you started. Oh, well, it's out on my card. Not a problem. I can wait. In fact, I was going to go grab a drink real quick. Right. If
I
it
do the
keeps
same.
going, if it keeps going, then you know it's a smokescreen objection. And then you know it's actually a fear-based objection. All fear-based objections boil down to one thing and one thing only. If I buy this, am I still going to fail? We could do a whole nother podcast just on that one single objection. But yes, be prepared, assume the sale, have your links up, and collect payment. My favorite way to collect payment, I have my clients create a visual of their offer. It's a 2-slide offer. If you're on Zoom, you're going to screen share. If you're on the phone, you're going to text them one picture at a time. 64% of the population are visual learners. So supplementing that conversation with the offer with some kind of visual really helps educate the buyer, and an educated buyer is much easier to close, right? So after going over the 3-step process and your unique opportunity, I'm going to summarize basically all their pain points. And I'm going to say, let's say I value the program for 6 months at 4K. I'm going to say, Miss Jones, if I was able to help you lose the 30 to 40 pounds that, in your own words, you said you've been struggling to lose for the last half decade, I was able to help rekindle some of the spark in your relationship because you said you've been really insecure, based upon what you're seeing in the mirror. If I was able to help the lower back pain, the knees and the ankles that are hurting from carrying the extra weight, and help you get back on those beautiful hikes in Scottsdale, Arizona. If I was able to help you increase the longevity so you're able to play with your grandkids 15 to 20 years from now. If I was able to help you do all of that, would that be worth $4,000? We're like, yeah. Do you mind telling me why a little bit? And then they tell me why. Then I say, the good news is, Miss Jones, it's not that expensive. It's only $750 down. Enrollment fee, it's going to cover X, Y, and Z. And we roll you into a monthly $350 a month. How would you like to proceed from here? Get them signed up. So it's all dependent on your offer structure and what those numbers are going to look like. But right now, there's been a lot of different terms used in the industry for this right now. But I like an enrollment fee, which you're getting a little bit more cash up front, into a monthly reoccurring with a 60-day cancel policy.
Yeah, awesome. The 60-day cancellation, so they have to let you know 60 days ahead of time. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. So like bare minimum, they'll be working with you for 3 months. But the way that you set that up on Stripe is that monthly payment. So let's just take this 750 enrollment fee. That's going to cover your first month of coaching, your customized onboarding, your customized nutrition, fitness, supplement, rest recovery, your cardio plan. Then on the 30th day, you're going to roll into a monthly reoccurring of 250 a month, right? And with a 60-day cancel policy. But the way you set that up on Stripe is that monthly payment goes off into infinity. So you don't have to, at the 6-month mark, have the extension offer
Oh,
conversation.
I never do re-sign conversations. Yeah. I, and based on the client that I'm working with, some of them do have enrollment fees, last month, first month upfront. It just depends on like kind of what the situation is, or if there's like a need for cash. But yeah, I don't like the re-sign conversation. I think just going month to month with some kind of cancellation policy is just
Mhm.
easy because
Yes.
why rock the boat? Okay, so if somebody is trying to assess the financial situation before the sales call without flat out asking about a credit score, jokes aside, right? Like, what, how do you kind of poke around and prod? Again, you've got rapport built, all that feels good, but what does that look like?
On the Calendly or whatever you use to book calls, which I'm very bullish on not manually booking calls. I like the automations. I like the text. I want a pre-call guide going out, warming up the lead into prospects. So on that Calendly question, or if you're using Go High Level, you build into your meeting look booking form. I just love this question. I used this question for 3 years in a row. Never had anyone bitch or complain about it, which is, if you were able to find a way to lose your desired amount of weight and reach your health goals through our online nutrition coaching program, would you be willing and able to invest in getting the help necessary to get there? Then you're going to have a drop down menu. There's going to be 3 answers. The answers are yes, I have the cash to invest in myself. Yes, I may or may not have the cash, but I'm resourceful or I have access to credit. No, my cash flow is month to month and I have no access to credit. And there's just 3 options that they drop down. When if you have that integrated to your Google Calendar, obviously you're going to see those answers in your email, but also in your Google appointment. And now you're going to know, based upon their answer selection, how much conversation in the beginning of the call you're going to have about conditions versus decisions and resources versus resourcefulness. Like, how willing are you to do something different than what you've been doing in the past to try to solve this problem? Also, I like to use the faster method. This is not my method. The faster method's been around for a really long time, but it works really good for fit pros and nutrition coaches. You ask this in the qualification stage. Ms. Jones, I'd love to just kind of get a read on your lifestyle and habits. Do you mind if I ask you some questions revolving around that? And so FASTER stands for fast food alcohol stimulants. Stimulants is like coffee or energy drinks. T is treats, E is entertainment, and R is restaurants. And so what you do is you ask them like, and so how much are you eating out at like fast food? And you start to get an idea of how much they're spending on all of those things. Again, fast food, alcohol, stimulants, treats, entertainment, and restaurants. And what you'll find out is most people are spending like $400 to $600 a month on all of those things, right? Now multiply that times 12. You're looking at like $5,000 to $6,000 to $7,000 that people are spending on things that are actually moving them further away from their goals. And so now that I have that number at the end, if there is a financial objection, I'm going to resort back to that conversation that we had. And I'm going to use this phrase, Ms. Jones, would it be reasonable to reallocate some, not all, I don't want you to live a boring life, but just reallocate some of that spend that was moving you further away from your goals and move it towards something that would move you closer to your goals. And so based again upon those answers, we can know if I'm going to use the faster method. Another way of doing this is in the qualifications phase, you can state that what we know here at company XYZ, Miss Jones, is that the number one cause of chronic disease and weight gain in people is stress. And the two biggest causes of stress in people's life are finances and relationships. How are things going there? And get like an idea of the stress levels in their relationship. This will bring to light financial and spousal objections a lot earlier. The last thing I'm going to say about this is that a firm just came out with a firm anywhere. And so you as a coach can use this today. It's called a logistical solution to a financial objection. So if you go into the firm app and you go to store and you type in one-time payment, you can get a one-time virtual credit card. It's a Visa card that can be paid to any invoice, and you're only going to pay credit card processing fees. So it's something that my clients have been using to overcome financial objections. You just literally, most people already have the Affirm app or have used it. You just go to the store, type in one time. They can take 5 minutes to apply. Most of the time, it doesn't even hit their credit score. And then they can just pay your Stripe invoice in full, and then they pay Affirm back on whatever the payment terms are.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, there's so many options for financing too. I mean, that's a whole other podcast episode too. I just wanted to get really clear because I think that coaches just they hear these objections and they're either really turned off by it, they don't want to feel pushy, and nothing about the way that you explain that feels pushy, right? It all feels like you were just trying to solve the problem. You're trying to be the solution to any and every pain point that they have. And I think that's really what I want to keep reiterating over and over again. So now I just have kind of a few just like questions that I hear that are kind of randomized from coaches that I work with, people in the DMs. But how long would you give a setter or a closer time before you let them go? And I ask this because I can't tell you how many people I have met where they're like, oh, my friend does my setting and they've been doing it for 6 months. What are their KPIs? They've booked like 3 calls. Like, oh, okay, cool. So what does that look like?
Well, back to the training example, we at least need 2 weeks of training them, right? Then we need like another 2 weeks of them implementing what we've taught them and inspecting what you expect. If you're not meeting with them and you're not inspecting what they're expecting, or you're not inspecting what you expect for them, and they're terrible, that is your fault. And I don't care how quickly you fire them, you're going to get the next person. You're going to probably do the same thing all over again. Now you're just wasting your time. I think a very general rule of thumb is like 90 days. If they're really still struggling and you're putting in the work after 90 days, you can make a decision to move on. I will tell you from coaching thousands of sales professionals in my career, um, it takes about a year for someone to be really good at their job in sales. Like it really takes a lot of opportunities, a lot of at bats, right? And so then if you have a sales professional and they're only getting 2 or 3 sales calls a week, like it's really hard to determine. And it's also hard for them to get the reps necessary to get good at it, right? Especially if they've never done it before. So a 90-day plan is really where I I would call it like a probationary period. And you also want to seed that in the interview process and in the hiring process that, hey, everyone that we bring in is on a 90-day plan and an evaluation. And then we can discuss next steps from there. And then, by the way, if they're killing it, then we could talk about possibly, compensation increase after the 90-day mark.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say is like the biggest mistake or top 2 mistakes you see coaches make that are newer, like when like sales mistakes?
The number one skill set for all top sales professionals is emotional stability. You know, it's the old Mike Tyson saying, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Right. It's like that is sales for you, man. You have to learn how to swim in a sea of rejection, and you have to keep your head above water. If you're highly neurotic, which means you're sensitive to negative emotion, man, you're going to get eaten alive in the online marketing, online sales, and setting world. You, again, and this is why it goes back to your intention. If your intention is pure, the consequences don't matter. They just don't matter. If someone says no, I don't care. There's going to be a next lead. There's going to be the next booking. There's going to be the next person that does want to work with me. So, number one is going to absolutely be emotional stability. From there, there's a few other things that we can go. I think people have a really hard time in the beginning of their sales careers being likable listeners. There's many polls out there of buyers that have been polled that will tell you, like 41% of people feel the worst asset or the worst skill set for a salesperson is they talk too much. And so you're talking too much because you're not critically listening. And you have to be what's called the likable listener. You have to listen with your eyes. I see what you're saying. Your ears, I hear what you're saying. Your heart, I care what you're saying. But most importantly, your attention, I care about what you're saying. And so a lot of times people, when they're new and they're taking sales calls, the baby's crying in the background, the dog is barking, someone is clanging pots and pans in the dishwasher. There's all these distractions going around, and like this lead and a prospect, they can barely pay attention themselves. Like, become a likable listener, and one of the ways of doing that is by learning labels. It sounds like, it seems like, it looks like, it feels like. So you ask a question, you label, you said 3 or 4 words, and now you get more information back.
I think that so many coaches fumble their sales calls whenever they just don't let them speak. You know what I mean? Like, there's a difference between letting somebody just word vomit for too long versus truly just taking over the entire call. And I think you can tell within the first few minutes that like they've either established authority or they haven't. You know, I can tell within the first 5 minutes, probably sooner, realistically, if somebody's going to be successful on that sales call. And I know you can too. It's probably like within the first 10
5
seconds,
minutes.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah. But seeing how that dynamic is built, um, what would you say? I mean, if there's one tip out of all of this that anyone at any level can take away, and that I want you to give them that they need to work on immediately, like what would that be?
Tonality training. There's 5 tonalities that you have to master and learn: curious, confused, challenging, concerned, and playful. People have scripts, and they get a script and they know the words to say, but they say it in the wrong tonality. And so, therefore, it doesn't hit the emotional target, and you sound scripted. When you sound scripted, you sound like a robot. When you sound like a robot, you can't connect with people. And so there's 5 tonalities to learn. Curious. John, I'm just curious, what are you doing now in order to lose the weight? Confused. John, when you when you said frustrated, how did you mean exactly? Challenging. John, what if nothing changes and God forbid things get worse? Concerned. In order to do concerned, always put your hand on your heart, because it's hard not to be concerned when you put your hand over your heart. John, what's really holding you back from moving forward? And playful. So, John, why didn't you give us a call like 3, 4 months ago? And so you have to learn in sales those tonalities. And by the way, no one's teaching those tonalities. And the other thing is that you can learn is how to get your facial expressions to match those tonalities. So I know you know about this because you were on television. Like, really great Hollywood coaches are not only teaching you how the tonality, but how to get the physiology to match the tonality so it's believable. So tonality training and spending time. And by the way, I make all my clients do this after the 4th week when they learn the script. They have to go into their calendar and send me a screenshot of 30-minute blocks on their calendar while they're practicing these questions in their script out loud. You have to practice out loud.
I mean, I agree. I think that people also make the mistake of not recording their Zoom calls. Like, can we talk about that? Like, people are not recording their freaking sales calls. And you telling me, well, I felt like it went really well, does not help. You know what I mean? I think so many coaches are afraid to watch themselves back.
Yeah, it's the best educator that you're ever going to get. I tell all my clients, and the best way of doing that, guys, is like, you don't want to get on the meeting and be like, hey, how are you? Then hit the record button. This call is being recorded. Like, it's super awkward. So go into your Zoom settings and make sure all of your calls record automatically, as soon as they jump on, they're going to get notified, and it's totally normal. It's just like when you call, whatever cell phone company, you got to like pay a bill. It's like, this call is being recorded for quality assurances. You don't care. But like, it's super awkward when you're manually do it like 3-4 minutes into the conversation. So just set it up to do it automatically. And I promise you, it's the greatest educator and sales coach you'll ever have, watching yourself back. One last tip. If you're not doing Zoom calls and you're new and you do have to read a script and go through your script and you're doing phone calls, then you can put your phone on speakerphone and just record it in front of your computer on Zoom, but keep your camera on. You want to watch your physiology while you were taking that phone call. Because a lot of times girls are going to be playing with their hair, guys are going to be rocking back and forth, you're going to be tapping your foot frantically on the floor, and like you're not engaged, you're not connected with the person because your physiology is all out of whack. And you'll see that and you're like, oh my God, I got to stop doing that.
The second you see yourself doing something annoying, I swear, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I was doing that so many times, right? Or I said like so many times, right? Like, you just hear certain things and you were immediately so turned off by that. Absolutely.
One of my favorite, I'll tell a quick story because they're called filler words. Every single one of us has filler words. I'm going to listen back to this podcast. I'm going to have my filler word. I said a whole bunch, but for some people, it's like, oh, God, great, great, or perfect, perfect, awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay. And then they bridge that filler word to the next question. And like, I'm reviewing a sales call one time, and the guy's like, my wife just left me. She took half of everything. I haven't seen my kids in 3 months. And the sales guy's like, awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay. And like, you don't even notice you're saying it. Like, this guy's like going through this terrible thing. And like, you just have this filler word that you use, but he never would have noticed it unless we actually recorded the call, and then he knew not to do that anymore.
And he felt like an asshole. That's wild. That's
Yeah. And you also become incredibly unlikable because you obviously weren't listening. Right. And
correct.
that's
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think we covered like so many, this could easily be a series, right? But is there anything else that I didn't ask you that I should have, or anything that you want to share? Obviously, I will link getting in touch with you in the show notes.
yeah. If there's one message that I have that I just always like to share, and this is very Tony Robbins of me, but I like to share it. I believe success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure in life. Like, if you're not truly fulfilled, if your cup is not being filled up, and you may be successful, you may have all this revenue, you might be running this team, but you have to be incredibly fulfilled at doing with what you love to do. And if you have contempt for sales and marketing, and you have contempt for topics that you really don't know all that much about, man, running a business is going to be brutally hard, and you're not going to be fulfilled. You're basically like someone that's watched every episode of Grey's Anatomy and you think you're a brain surgeon. There's what you know about sales. There's what you don't know about sales. And then there's what you don't even know about. And there's way more of that third bucket than there is the other two combined. So please don't have casual contempt for sales and marketing. Embrace it. It's one of the most fulfilling aspects and a skill set that you can, man, leverage to create an extraordinary life. So don't say things like, I hate sales, I hate setting. Focus on the fulfillment of impacting another life.
And that's just such a fixed mindset in general. Like, I hear it with social media. I hate social media. Well, you started first of all, you started an online business, but second of all, like, the only way to make sales is to market and sell. Like you can't hate the business. Like, trust me, I get it. If we could all just coach and that's it, I totally understand that. But that's not a business, right?
You're
So
you're not a retail nutrition coach. You're an online nutrition coach. Yeah. And like I know this is super simple. I think you know Rico, and Rico says this all the time, the guy that teaches social media content. And it's so simple, but it's so true. The point of social media is to be social.
yeah, I know. I say that. Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yep. I know, and you never know, like every conversation you start, like it really sucks if you're viewing every conversation as like this could be a sale or this is to make money and then that's holding you back, right? Because truly like I've started so many conversations on social media that had absolutely nothing to do with product purchase and just everything to do with networking. And that's the thing too, like you just never know who you're going to meet because this whole entrepreneurship thing is like super lonely and most of your friends don't get it. Your family doesn't get it. They like support you, but they don't really get it. And so, you know, I have friends like in so many different places now and just I've networked and it's all through the DMs. Like it really is.
yeah. Yeah.
So anyway,
Hey, we work from home by ourselves. Where else am I going to be social? No one wants to talk to me at the gym. So like I'm screwed. Like the only place I got to talk to people is in the DMs. So
because you're wearing a hoodie doing your prep cardio, you know what I mean? No one wants to fuck with you. But anyway, Nick, I appreciate you. Thank you for
yes,
hanging out with me and coming on. And I am excited for people to listen to this one.
my absolute pleasure. It was a lot of fun. Thank you, Taylor.